Hello and welcome to Business on the Wire. I'm Mitali Mukherjee. In January this year, the world or worldwide, we crossed 10 billion doses in terms of COVID vaccines and vaccinations that had been administered. That's no mean feat, considering the fact that it was just over a year back that the first ever dose was administered in the UK. What seems unclear at this point, though, is where India stands in terms of its next steps. Will there be a booster shot for the general public and not just the vulnerable and the elderly? Will there be vaccinations provided for the under 12? What is the plan really in terms of opening up the market to alternate vaccines, including some that have been pending with their requests? Some of these questions remain unanswered as we've stepped into this year. And there remains, of course, this situation of inequity across the world. But there's also some questions to ask when we look back. When we started this entire pandemic or this episode, there was leading opinion and consensus that India would play a salutary and leading role in terms of providing these vaccines across the world. It was going to be the world's number one pharmacy. How did we do on that front? Did we really step up and provide the vaccines that were required, especially in low income countries that are still struggling with access to vaccines, especially from the more developed countries like America? That's one question to answer. What were the missteps that were made in terms of planning? Why did we have periods of so much panic and so much stress when vaccines weren't available? And are we quite confidently over that hump at this point? Lots of questions then, and lots of analysis in terms of the journey covered so far with COVID, with vaccines, and more importantly, what do we have planned next? Joining me to talk about that is a lady who has nearly 3 decades of experience in all of this. She's an independent supply chain consultant. She's been looking at the pharma business, like I said, for 30 years now. I'm very pleased to introduce my guest today, Miss Neeta Sanghi. Neeta, thank you so much for joining me. You've been tracking the trials and tribulations, if I may, of this entire vaccine supply process. I wanted to start by talking about the big marker that we hit in January, which is where we hit 10 billion doses worldwide. What can we say with some confidence at this point in terms of vaccine supply, even when you look at it at a global context first before we talk about India?
Thank you, Mitali, for this talk and for giving me a platform to share my thoughts. Yes, indeed, it's a great milestone for the world to achieve. I mean, who would have thought a year ago that the world can deliver 10 billion vaccine doses and administer it to people? I mean, just to set the perspective, the global manufacturing of all vaccines put together, children and adult, before the pandemic was just about 5 billion annually. So to double that and coming on top of very quick development, it's definitely been a milestone worth a feeling of pride on the part of the pharma industry.
Yeah. Please go ahead.
However, it's not all uniform, as we know. When you look at manufacturing, about 10.9 billion doses were reported as having been manufactured end of December 2021. And roughly 90% of them came from just 4 places: China, India, USA, and the UK and the European Union countries combined. So together they accounted for 90% plus. About more than 90% came from the manufacturing of just 5 vaccines: Sinovac and Sinopharm from China, AstraZeneca's Vaxzevria or Covishield as it is known in India, and the 2 mRNA vaccines from Pfizer and Moderna. And unfortunately, carrying forward this monopoly, the same is also perceived when the administration of doses is concerned. So while the developed or the high income countries have given about 1.85 doses per person of their population, with many countries in the Europe accounting for 2 times. Even Canada has done something like 2.1 dose. US is a little lower because of vaccine hesitancy, not for lack of vaccines. The upper middle income countries are also in that same range, where China has done more than 2 doses and the rest of them are a little lower. But the picture changes dramatically when we go to the next two groupings of countries. The lower middle income group, to which India belongs, is at about 1.1 or little less than 1.1 dose per person. Even this is largely because of India. India has done about 1.25 dose per person. The rest of the countries are below 1. And when you look at the low income countries, which today the latest grouping puts only 29 of the African countries there, not all 54. And the population is about 0.7 billion. They've done very, very poorly at less than 0.15 dose per person. So they've hardly got any shots. So I think on the one hand, while we have this huge achievement, on the other hand, it's also become, as you know, everyone is calling it vaccine apartheid.
Yeah. And I want to talk about that in detail and India's role as well, Neeta. But first, I just wanted to set some markers from India's perspective. As you said, at this point, it
Sure.
looks like 1.1 dose per person. Do we have a handle on the number as it stands in terms of vaccines that have been administered, both doses? Because the problem for India has been variance in numbers. What you hear from the government is not what you hear from the private sector, for instance.
So what I have always looked at in terms of the numbers is I looked at the COVID dashboard. And that is, I think, rather than private, because I don't know who in private will have the capacity to be able to garner this number, considering that you have a lack of vaccination centers. I think the COVID dashboard, the COVID platform has been an extremely good step where, it gives people like me a feel. Now, while the numbers, I don't know, maybe the numbers do change a little. For example, if I was to look now at yesterday's for the day dose, and if I was to look at it in the evening, there'll be a minor change. Yeah. But I still think it's very, very reliable. So if you look at the COVID dashboard, we've given about 1.75 billion doses. And more than 90% of the adult population has got at least a single dose. And I think something close to 65 to 70% of the population has got double doses. Okay. What is not doing all that well is the precaution doses, because I find that although the precaution doses were, announced and started almost a month back, just about 1.75 crore doses have been given, though I don't really know the reason for this. It could be that, people, it's of course restricted as of now. It's available only to frontline workers and to senior citizens above 60 with comorbidities. So it's not available for all. But yeah, that's a lower dose. The one figure on which I haven't been able to lay a handle is on the how many of our teens between 15 to 18 have got vaccinated. Because somewhere I see a figure of 7 crores and another place I see a figure of 1.2 or something. So I'm not sure how many children have been vaccinated. I think on India's vaccination drive, it now appears that we have enough vaccines of one type, which is Covishield. We don't have a variety. We still do not have any mRNA vaccines. And so, yeah, there are questions about our vaccination drive. But since, it has been largely found that all vaccines are very effective in reducing the severity of the disease, in reducing hospitalization, in reducing mortality, we could say that, our people are well covered as of now. And with the virus itself on the down track as of now. Yeah. a short-sighted view could be that, yeah, we are covered for now.
Right. So let me ask you a two-part question then. Can we say with
Sure.
confidence that we have crossed that hump of a supply crisis, something we were staring at, in the middle part of last year in terms of availability of vaccinations? And at the risk
Okay.
of sounding simplistic, why is it important to have more than one vaccine available in the system?
Okay. So tackling the first part first, are we over the hump? Uh, See, as of now, we do have adequate quantities available of two vaccines, Covishield to a great extent, and Covaxin also has increased its capacity. If we see November, December, about 5 crore Covaxin has been made available. So we easily have something like about 30 crores or 200, 300 million available every month just out of these two.
Okay.
Plus, we are now seeing Cobivax. We have to yet see how it rolls out.
Right.
Because there again, the company doesn't have a very high capacity, and they said they're going to be increasing their capacity, but the government has placed an order on for 5 crores. Then there is the Zycov D, but then that's extremely low. That's only for children, and so I don't think we can bank on it to a large scale. So in a way, one could say that unless there are newer variants, which, like Delta, which hit us hard. And this is also seen in the government actions. So we know that last year the government budgeted 35,000 crore rupees in their budget for vaccines, and they delivered free vaccines to the people with some ups and downs, with some policy fluctuations, but it eventually did happen to some extent. But this year's budget, that 35,000 crores has been reduced to zero.
Yeah.
Which means that the government does not foresee that it will be required to provide vaccines for its citizens on any scale. Now, that I think is a little bit disturbing is too strong word, but probably one is not able to understand the rationale behind this particular action.
What to your mind could be the reason, Neeta? Because as you said, there doesn't seem to be a supply problem. So then one wonders why a decision on a wider booster or preventive shot has not been taken at this point. Conversely, there were also concerns that there are vials lying on shelves. There's wastage happening because they're crossing their expiry date. Let the jabs go into arms. Why has it suddenly hit this stall, especially after supply is not a problem as we've established?
I think I will answer this question and the second part of your first question sort of together, because the answer is more or less mixed. If I look at it, I can't read the government's mind, so I don't know why they have done it.
No one can at
I
this
really,
point. Not to
yeah,
worry.
and I wouldn't like to speculate, and so let's keep that question aside. As far as why do we think we would need more vaccine shots now, as we are seeing in the high income and other countries, people are going in for third shot, for fourth shots. So the boosters also have limited usage.
Yeah.
Right. So you take a third shot and someone says after 4 months, someone says after 6 months. It's, the jury is still out on that. And there are believers and there are non-believers. So I think probably, now I'm not an immunologist, but just as a layperson, this is purely a layperson's viewpoint. I would feel that the strategy of providing vaccines only to people with comorbidities or, immunosuppressed or frontline workers is probably a good strategy. Okay. While India may be out of the vaccine supply constraint, the world is not. The world is not. So it would be a good idea if we were to export more of our vaccines. And of course, as you said, they shouldn't expire. But then rather than putting them in our arms, if one could find a way of putting these shots in the arms of, people in African countries, that would be a great thing. This is my view as a lay person, because I am not a medical person. But from whatever I read and whatever I see, it appears to me that just giving third and fourth doses, we so long as we continue with our other precautions like masking, of course, I mean, so if we don't do that, then we are at risk irrespective of vaccine doses also.
Yeah.
So this would be my take on that. And this would be where one place where, while the government has not spelled it out, but if this is their intent, then I would support it as a good idea. I would support it as a good idea.
There have also been questions about the complete lack of, any information now on what happens with children, because there was earlier talk of extending this vaccination drive downwards, going all the way up to the 12-year-olds. There was talk of introducing vaccines that can be administered to children under 12. Do we seem to have any plan in place? And where have we reached in terms of even clearance for vaccines that are acceptable for children of that age?
See, I mean, I know as much as you do probably on this subject, and there isn't any clarity, as you say, because one day, the government, even on the clearance part of it, just about a week before the booster shots were announced, Covishield was not approved as a booster.
Yeah.
Right? And Corbevax was not approved. And then after the doses were announced, it was suddenly approved. So we don't really know. And because if you look at worldwide, the vaccine which is being given to children above 5 is only the mRNA vaccine, which we don't have. And that is why having a basket of vaccines is important. Because there have been studies, like there was recently an Oxford study, which looked at booster shots if one has been given 2 doses of the AstraZeneca vaccine. And it found that an mRNA vaccine was better than giving a AstraZeneca vaccine itself. And even Corbevax was better than Covishield as the booster. But we haven't done that. So and we don't have any studies over here on the Indian population, which one could say that, okay, we have not followed the Oxford study, but we've followed the Indian study. So we don't have that also. So in this scenario, it's extremely difficult to know. Today evening, we might have an announcement which takes us all by surprise. So we don't really know.
So some question marks going ahead, and some question marks when you look back as well, Neeta. I just wanted to go back to the point you made right at the start about how 4 or 5 vaccines basically cornered the market, and the countries included, India and China. But in data that you yourself have shared, we didn't quite turn out to be the pharmacy and the lone star that the world wanted us to be. What does our contribution stand at in terms of the world's output of COVID-19 vaccines as we step into this year?
I think we have forfeited, at least temporarily, the title of the pharmacy of the world as far as vaccines are concerned. Because it's not just that the world expected us to do it. We also expected us to do it. We told the world we'll do it. And we told the world that in November 2021, in January 2021, we told them that in February 2021, that we have provided vaccines and we will provide more vaccines. And because we didn't build up our manufacturing capacity, because we didn't look at it at all, in the month of April and May, we had no choice at that point of time, because we had no choice but to tell the world, sorry, but we come first. So I think while after a lot of initial hiccups, We've done okay as far as our own population is concerned, but we have definitely let down the world. Now, if you allow me to continue on this, I also feel that this is not just India's failure. It's also a failure on part of organizations like WHO and COVAX, because it is they who took up the gamut of providing vaccine shots to everyone. And of course, WHO has always done that, and WHO has also done a good job of it. The Serum Institute definitely owes a lot of its capacity and technology transfers to WHO initiatives, starting right from 2006 onwards. That's how it was able to, deliver vaccines to us. But what they did was they just put all their eggs in one basket, which was Serum Institute, which was also carrying all the eggs of India's basket. And there wasn't much effort put in by anyone to increase capacities. In fact, I distinctly recall in September 2020, watching Adar Punawala on one of the news channels, where he said that no one is investing in manufacturing capacity, and it will take until 2024 to vaccinate all the entire world. And who would know it better than him? So I think India has been extremely complacent. No, we didn't think about it. We just didn't think about it.
When you go back to that April May period though, Neeta, and because you've watched this pharma industry for decades now, candidly, what do you think was going on there? Was it bad management by the government? Was it the manufacturer also playing at arm twisting? Because there was a lot of on again, off again. No, we don't have it. Oh, we have it. Oh, the government has asked for too much. The price is too low. A lot of that narrative kept spinning and spinning in an environment where people were quite and anxious about the availability of vaccines. When you go back to that period, as you said, we were complacent. What were the missteps that you can see that happened?
I think one of the things I would talk about two things here. No, as you said, knowing the pharma industry.
Yeah.
One is that the Indian pharmaceutical industry, and especially the vaccine part of it, is very different from that in the high income countries. In the high income countries, the companies like Glaxo, Merck, Pfizer, J&J, all the so-called big pharma, they are into vaccines as well. In India, it is not so. None of these companies manufactures vaccines in India.
Right.
Even amongst the larger Indian pharmaceutical companies, none of them is into vaccines. So we have a separate pharma industry and we have a separate vaccine industry. In fact, you will be surprised that the pharma industry numbers, the details of the pharma market and growth, which come out every month, do not include vaccines. So in India, vaccine is a subset of the larger pharma market, and these are two non-inclusive subsets. So that's one difference. So while in the higher income countries, when COVID struck, companies like Pfizer, all of them, they could just draw their resources from the rest of the research. I know for a fact that some of the other research projects were put on the back burner, and the funds and everything was allocated to COVID vaccination.
Right.
In India, because the two industries are different, it didn't happen. Now, there are many reasons why the other companies have never indulged in vaccines. But then the surprising thing is that even COVID has not been able to motivate them to do it, probably because it was too tricky a situation. On the government part, I would say that, the same ambiguity and lack of clarity that we see now has been its hallmark. So, very frankly, I wouldn't, I think, I wouldn't say that the companies, when they were, in April, May, as you mentioned, that there was some amount of ambiguity. I would say that the government is more responsible for that than the companies. I mean, if you don't place an order on a company, and you expect them you to assume that you will order, but since you haven't placed an order, you're not legally bound to it. How do you expect them to function? So you don't give them money for investment, you don't give them any other resources, you don't give them any facilities, you don't even place purchase orders on them, and then you expect to you expect them to supply at as low as $2. If they're asking for $3, you want to beat them down to $2. So I think that it wasn't a very, and being the government, you have all the power. So the companies don't have any power against you. So I think somewhere in that period, there was this, I'm actually unable to understand it, because I have looked at this whole problem through a supply chain lens. Being a supply chain person, that's the only thing I know. So I have looked at it just as if I was the supply chain manager to supply vaccines to the country, what would I have done? And the first 2 or 3 steps that I can think of, I see no indication that it was done, and it should have been done in at least in August, September 2020, if not earlier. See, the developed nations, I'm sorry, I keep switching between this high income and developed, but the high income countries did it as early as March, April. No, I mean, for all his flaws, Trump started that for the United States, and he gave a lot of support. So we didn't do it even in September, October. Basic question, how many vaccines do we need? Where will they come from? We need so much for India, we need so much. If we have to become the supplier to other nations, where will it come from and which vaccine will it be? Had we just looked at these 2 questions, we would have had some answers by April, May.
Which brings us to the here and now and your point about exports, Neeta. At this point, do we have enough to export? What is the percentage of what we're exporting, and why aren't we doing better? Because, same thing with this last year, the vaccine made 3 thing happened, lots of pictures, lots of photo ops, boxes of, vials of the doses going overseas, and now nothing.
I think the export is also not all that simple. I mean, as you know, when Serum Institute reduced its manufacturing in December, it said it didn't have any exports. And the African countries are probably not in a position to even put those in arms. So I don't really know what is their logistics. So if someone has not invested in that logistics to make it reach people, and if, as they have been accusing, that they've been receiving whenever their supply comes in spurts, it doesn't come with enough advance notice, and near expiry stocks are sent to them. So they are not in a position to put those in the arms, and then that is held against them. So I think somewhere, maybe if today what is required is for India to make a plan for the next 6 months, or for Serum Institute to make a plan for the next 6 months and say, this is what is going to be available for export. And then for COVAX to place orders, and for them to coordinate with the African countries or whichever countries they are meant for, maybe some South American countries, so that coordination happens. Because unless and until you give those guys a plan that this is what you can expect in the next month, and then we have something called as a rolling plan. So you make a plan for a year, you break it down into weeks, and then every week you review it and keep, and then you have some form. So, these are basic supply chain principles. Someone has to just sit down and apply them. I think we are in a position today to export more than we are exporting probably. And that's happening because there is no one who is looking at these aspects. And probably COVAX should be doing more of it. WHO should be doing more of it.
One unrelated context, for the India landscape, Neeta, because there were some concerns that vaccines for issues not related to COVID, were getting stalled or were getting impacted because of the bulk of the focus was on getting the COVID vaccines out.
Yeah.
Did you see data to indicate any of that? Has that
Uh,
supply chain problem eased up now?
I actually haven't seen any data on that yet. But I think that 2 years down the line, we will find that yes, those were issues. Because after all, the bulk of our vaccines were coming from from Serum Institute. Now, Serum Institute was making over a billion vaccines every year. Now, I have no idea if they have continued to make those vaccines in addition to, the almost, I would say almost 1.4 billion COVID vaccines that they have made. I have no idea. So remember that their one capacity expansion building in January caught
Oh.
fire. So we don't really know that that ambiguity which is there with the government is also there with the companies. So they obviously, and you try to get in touch with them. My experience is they don't respond. So they generally don't respond. So
Yeah.
I have no clue. We'll probably know it, when some investigative journalist goes out there and digs out data, and then only we'll know.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I don't see that we'll know.
One final question, Neeta. When we launched into this, people were largely optimistic about India because everyone held up the polio example, saying here's a country that has so successfully or did so successfully over the last few decades carry out this polio vaccination drive. Um, do you see comparisons, and how, and very sort of candidly speaking, how did we come up in that comparison between one and the other?
I think if you are talking about the COVID vaccination drive in India,
Yeah.
then we've done a good job when we've got the vaccines. And I would say definitely the polio vaccination drive has been a help. I mean, today only I was reading, there's an article in Time, which is about some district called Dheri, somewhere in the north, where 100% adults have been given 2 doses. And it's hailed as an example of how to do vaccination, because the vaccination there is done by the health workers who are all female, who routinely work there. So I think that on the our challenge has been availability of vaccines. When vaccines have been made available, then getting them into the arms of people, even in the remotest places, we have done very well. We have really done an exemplary work. And in our country, even vaccine hesitancy is not like it is, in the high income countries. I mean, we don't have all those anti-vaxxers, and that's at least not a lobby. Maybe there are some individuals here and there who will not take it, but there's no lobby which says that. And there have been people, we have all done it, you have done it, I have done it. People around us, who are not convinced, we sort of explain to them, convince them, and we make them take it. So I think we've done a very good job. And that is why I feel that maybe India can actually help the African countries to build up that kind of a network where they are able to reach these shots to the people.
Oh, absolutely. I think so much to be proud of, but a lot to reflect on as
Yes,
well. The problem
yes,
is to not
yes,
do a stop-start mechanism when we have started something,
yes,
we've
yes,
executed it
yes.
well. Thank you so much for your time today. It's been really great chatting with you. Thank you for walking us through all the ups and downs and where things stand now. Really appreciate your time today, Neeta.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mitali. Thanks.
Get a sneak peek of exclusive content before everyone else for channel members only. Memberships start at Rs 89. Hit the join button below.